Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of YOML. This is the Year of Magical Learning podcast. We are on Reflection 224. I think this is a particular book that I think is important to me, so I'm not gonna say anything much other than just hand it over to Chris and see what we got.
Yeah, this is apparently a pretty famous novel that they study in school and stuff like that. I didn't have to read this stuff in school, so I can't remember where I stumbled upon this book, but it's called The Things They Carried by the author Tim O'Brien, and it's about soldiers in the Vietnam War from the US side, which is interesting because obviously you're Vietnamese and you didn't live over there when the war was going on, I don't think, right?
The war ended before I was born.
Yeah, so you obviously, but obviously this is important, was an important shaper of your life in a lot of ways too, as well, right? Just the whole Vietnam conflict in general.
From Vietnam War.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it definitely changed a lot of people's lives. And certainly the soldiers that fought in it, it changed their lives as well. This book is about Tim O'Brien, who is a Vietnam veteran. He wrote a memoir about his life, about the war, about post-war, about what he experienced and all the highs and lows of the camaraderie of fighting amongst his brothers, death and killing, and then, what it's like to come back home and try to reincorporate yourself into a different world and all the struggles that go with that. And all the stuff that goes into a lot of these things, right? So it was a pretty famous book. It's called The Things They Carried, and it was about the things that they carried, literally the things they carried, and then kind of metaphorically the things that they carried back with them to the Vietnam conflict. So this is my reflection from this particular book. It was a really good book, by the way. I'm always a little torn on like war books in general, just because it's like, I never want to call it a good book. It's similar to like my book, right? Like I would hope that nobody would ever reach out to me and say, "Oh, that was a great book." Like it's not a great book. It was awful. I mean, it's an awful book. I don't want to tell the story. He didn't want to tell the story. The reflection title is "The Stories Can Save Us," right? My thoughts of what this book made me think about was like stories have literal magical powers, in my opinion, and The Things They Carried was a magical story. For the reader, when you're consuming a book like this, it has the power to change paradigms, to open your mind to different experiences, to put you like in the driver's seat. When you read my book, right? I know you've mentioned many times, you're like, I felt like I was right there with you. I mean, this is very similar. I felt like I was right there with Tim and his platoon and the Alpha Company, the people that he was there with, and going through what they were going through. I could visually see what he was talking about and how he was describing their life and what they were going through. And it really helped to open my eyes and change my paradigms as to like, hey, this is his life. This is what he was going through. This is what he's experiencing. This is putting me right in the front seat of all that action and understanding the stuff that was going on in his brain and being able to share that to me. And honestly, I'll never, ever, get over the fact of how powerful words and stories are that be able to transport me from my attic upstairs, quiet in my home, and having some words on a piece of paper transport me to another land, another place, another time, something that's incredibly powerful and I think very uniquely human. And yeah, I mean, there's something just incredibly powerful about that. For me, one of the visuals that I got that I can maybe leave with you, he described a firefight after like, like he, like got into like a gun battle or something like that, a heated gun battle with exchange. He described it as like, you'll never feel more panic than that moment than in your life. But after everything calms down and you realize that you survived, he was like, the world around you never seems so great. The sky looks so clear. You appreciate all the nature around you. You take in all the little things as if they were being experienced for the first time. And he was like, there's something weirdly powerful about just stripping yourself down to going, oh shit, I'm still here. Like I get to look around and see all the beauty of the world, and taking in that moment. And like it's just such a crazy extreme to go from literally almost dying in a firefight with somebody and maybe killing somebody else, and then going, oh man, I really appreciate my life and value my life, and like this is pretty powerful. It's just crazy dichotomies of experiences that can happen simultaneously for soldiers. I mean, and these are things that I would never know, right? I've never been in that environment, and his stories were able to help me to change my paradigms to be able to see what he was seeing, right? Now flip it around though, because this story wasn't really for, these stories are never really for the readers. That's a byproduct, in my opinion, of us giving us the paradigms. It's always for the writer most of the time. And stories, and when we write these kinds of stories, they have the power to heal. And for that, I know all too well, right? So while I don't know what Tim went through, like I do know what I went through. And, for me, writing, this is why I wrote, because like, I've talked to you about this before, but like, this is legit, like, very, very serious. As time goes on further and further, it's been a little over 3 years now since Amelia was born. We're coming up on the anniversary of her 3-year death in less than a month. As time goes on further and further, it's only been 3 years, right? Like that's not that long, but I struggled to remember what it was like to be in that room with her. I struggled to remember what she looked like. I struggled to remember how it felt like holding her hand. I struggled to remember all the pain that she was in and feel that again. I struggled to remember those last few days with her and the last few hours with her when she was taking her last few breaths with my wife in her arms. And that sucks. Like that's why I started writing, because I didn't want to forget these things. And these were the stories that I was able to tell myself and to share those stories so I could help myself process it and help myself document it, help myself remember, honestly, because I don't want to forget. But at the same time, like if I forgot all the great things, like, kangarooing with my daughter, or the days when it was just nice and peaceful and calm, I was sitting right next to her, and and just being in her presence and hearing her breathe, and and all the kind of more normalish things you do as a parent, like, I mean, all if I didn't write that stuff, I would forget those feelings, and that would be tragic. Honestly, I want to remember. I write to remember myself, and I write to help myself process. But there's a secondary reason why I write as well. I write to change the narrative as well, because if I didn't process these things and I didn't share these stories, I could lose my memory. And then what will remains is pretty much just all going to be painful for the most part. How did it feel to see the sky after a firefight? You retain the pain, you retain all of the crap, that, and if that was the only memory that I have of my daughter, that would be the absolute worst thing that I could ever imagine in my life. So I also write to change the narrative. And through this whole story, the Year of Magical Learning, through the original book that I wrote, I Can't Imagine, through all the stuff that you and I do, through Clubany, through all these things, right? Like, this is how I am able to reshape the narrative with my daughter and the life that we're living together today. Because I tell you this all the time, like, if I was talking to a friend the other day, and she, had read my book, and she was like, I always want to ask you about Amelia. She was like, I think about Amelia all the time, and she's like, I never know when we're together, like, having a drink or whatever, how to bring her up, and she was like, what do I ask you about? And I go, just ask me what we did today, because, like, this she's here in this conversation right now. Like, I wouldn't be doing this with you if this wasn't a part of my purpose and living for two with her, right? Like, ask us how our run was this morning. Ask us how, our reflection that we wrote, like, what did we learn today? Like, what did we learn in our, our new book that we started today, or whatever? Like, ask us what our day's been like, because we're doing
Right.
it
I
together.
mean, you ask your friend, hey, how was your day? I mean, you probably can ask Amelia how was her day? Just the same
Exactly.
as, because when you read a book, you know that you're living for two, so you're carrying two lives, and
Right.
so you approach as if you are her, and she is you.
Exactly. So the stories have the power to save us, right? Like, they can change paradigms for the readers, they can help us heal for the writers, and then they can also completely change the narrative for the whole story, right? Like, the story of
Right.
Amelia and me could be, my daughter was born severely premature and died. We went through a whole lot of trauma, and that's that. Or
Mhm.
the story could be, we're still together and we're reshaping that, and we reshape that through stories. There's no other way that I could describe this other than we've Amelia and I have collectively decided that that's not the story that we want to tell, and we've written the new story, and we're living that new story as we write it, and
Right.
and that's what we're sharing with other people. So, like, it's stories literally have the power to save us. I mean, that's my, I don't know how any other way to describe that other than, like, writing this stuff out, sharing this stuff, changing the narrative, telling a different story saved my life. And not only, like, and then it helped me to also help my daughter to save her life, in a lot of ways, because she's not here to continue to live on. Nobody gets to see her growing up and all this other stuff, like, but I do, like, through another story, right?
Hmm.
So that's it. So I finished this with just saying thanks to Tim for sharing his story and never giving up. I'm going to keep doing the same, right? So the question is what stories have transformed your life, or where you can take it from wherever you want to take it, I guess, from that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, because our reality is what we believe. And so the stories, like you say, you can change the narrative in terms of what you believe is happening between you and your daughter. And that is what becomes your purpose. I think
Right.
without understanding what you believe, it's hard to follow through and do the activities that aligns with that kind of belief. So a
Right.
story to me, it is, I think, without a doubt, that if you don't have a story, you don't have a life. I
I
think,
agree.
right?
I
Because
agree.
regardless of how you see your life, if you see your life as life is good, then the story tell life is good. In the same token, if you say your life is bad, then basically life is bad, because that's the
Right.
story that you give yourself.
Right.
And if you say, well, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and I hate doing this, I hate doing that, well, that's still a story.
Right.
A story is essentially, how do you want to take, what is the next step you want to take? That's more or less a story. You can say, hey, your daughter was premature and then she just passed away, and that's it. Or you can take the story and then you do different thing in that narrative that you created, because it
Well,
allows you to create, because you say, hey, this. Yeah, I met Amelia, right?
Mhm.
And she came to you, and then whatever happened after that, you can decide what kind of story based on the, I guess, the evidence or information that comes with it. Because hey, the evidence is that she came to Earth, right? And then she has to go into heaven. So the story can be narrated in any way that you want to, or it can
Right.
be narrated for you, depending on if you have any kind of control over that, in terms of, I say, well, I do have control, or I don't. If you say I don't, then you don't. If you say you do, then you do. And so that, to
Exactly.
me, that's how powerful a human mind is, its ability to take something and live it. Because the thing, you think about me, right? My name is True, right? It doesn't mean anything in Vietnamese. It doesn't mean anything in Vietnamese, but
Right.
it sounds like true
Right.
in English.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of that, I speak the truth most of the time. I just cannot do the opposite. It takes too much work. For
Right.
whatever reason, that was instilled in my head, right? If you think your name has a meaning, then it has meaning. If
Yeah.
you
I
think
agree.
your name doesn't have meaning, then it doesn't
And it
have meaning,
doesn't. Yeah. I agree.
right? Because the thing is, if you say, I'm this person, and it's not to say that, okay, if you name your kid something and they'll be that. That's not always the case. It's only if the kid believes it. If the
Right.
kid believes it, he's gonna say, well, if my name is True and it sounds like this and it reminds me of that, it's basically a cue or a trigger for us to remember the things that associate with that, true, integrity, and all that. That's because I think so. It's not
Right.
because my name is, right.
Right.
You- so you can tell me, hey, my name is, Prince, my name is Billionaire, whatever. If I
Right.
don't believe it, it doesn't do anything. But if I believe it, I will be halfway there, just because that reminds me all the time. Everybody call me, hey, millionaire, millionaire, whatever.
Right.
But you say, hey, you're a knight, right? A knight, this knight, that. And you believe it, it starts to, and this is writing your own story.
Yeah.
And then a story is that powerful for the writer, right? But that's also beneficial for the reader as well, because the reader has the ability to be there with the writer.
Right.
And to me, that there's tremendous benefit for the writer, because for one is you're able to store this. You store your memory
Mhm.
onto something that is physical, and it can retain it without having you to keep everything in your head.
I don't remember this reflection. And no joke. I mean, like almost every night when we read these things, I have to go reread them myself because I'm like, oh, oh, okay, yeah, I remember. Now there's like maybe 40 books where if you just ask me right now, they are embedded into my subconscious. Where it's like I
Mhm.
like these things have become a part of me now. Like the things they carried, I honestly before I pulled this book up today, I forgot that I read this book, and then
Mhm.
like let alone what did I learn from it, right? Like I don't know. If I hadn't have written this down and I hadn't have shared this with you and we hadn't have talked about it, like this would have been, this would have like poof come and gone in my life. I would have gone, oh yeah, I remember that. Somebody would have said The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. I would go, oh yeah, I read that one time. What was it about? Oh shit, I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean? Like I
Eh,
wouldn't have remembered.
Yeah, I mean, this is the remembering self, right? And you
Mhm.
remember in the book you talk about
Yeah.
there's two self, right? Your experiencing self and the remembering self. The thing is, this is why I was glad that you had wrote the journal while you were in the NICU, because
Right.
otherwise I would not be able to get the vivid stories and in the background. Man, I would not have the understanding of being right there with you, because your remembering
Yeah.
self will not have all the details in the right and accurate places, and
Agreed.
it may even fabricate something that it thinks it remembers. I think that
100%. I mean, like I said, that was what I wrote this reflection about. I really struggle. I want to remember what my life was like with Amelia. I mean, those are probably the 39 most precious days of my life that I've ever experienced. Most special days of my life, whether or not some of them were filled with pain and scared and all that other stuff. But either way, like there's nowhere that I would rather be than those 39 days of my life. If I could choose, if you could tell me to go anywhere in this world at any time and place, I would probably go back to those 39 days. And I struggle to remember those 39 days. Like, I mean, I literally do. I was thinking about it this morning, like, because right now is the time between March 15th and April 22nd when she was alive. And I was trying to remember, like, what was, it's March 29th. What's going, what was going on today? Like, I forget, like she would be 14 days old. Like, what was, I don't remember. I guess 14 days she would have been past her initial scare. Like, what was life like today? Like, what were we doing? I don't know. And I couldn't tell you unless I had written this stuff down. If I hadn't documented this stuff, and I can't go back and remember it. Like this, like what I was just talking about with this reflection, I would have never remembered. I think this was a pretty good reflection. And I'm glad that I wrote this, and I'm glad that I can go remember back for my own self to remember, oh yeah, stories are really powerful, Chris. Keep telling your story. Keep sharing Amelia's story. Keep going. This is why you're doing what you're doing. If I hadn't have documented this stuff, I won't remember.
Right. A story, it is so much powerful for the writers than it is for the readers. So that's why, I mean, for me, I don't really care whether people watch our episode or podcast or not. It is for more for me and for you than for the audiences.
Sure.
This is because this is a process of documenting a process, a journey. Because just like in the book, you have dad jokes of the day, right? Do you remember the dad joke? And unless you go back to read the book, that's the thing is, there's a lot of memory it's going to fade away if we don't document them. And so that's why I think documenting them is so powerful for us to understand where we came from and go back to the places where we have been before, and recollect all of the evidence and experience the past as if we can transport in a time machine, go back to that time. But if you don't, then a lot of times the memory fades and it's lost forever, and those precious memory can never ever be recovered.
Yeah, I mean, 1000%. Like I'm so glad that we took the time to do this as well, because we're going to continue to do this stuff. Do you remember when we first started the core values quest? I guess that was like October of 2020. Was that when we did that first? Yeah, like November 2020.
With the first
with Blake
guinea pig.
I think that was like November. I want to say maybe like November.
It's probably in the fall of 2020.
Right.
Because you and I started doing the business, Sportly business.
I think it was July.
And then we transformed that somewhere in October or November.
Right.
I think, Blake was our first experiment.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if you remember back to this when we were having discussions around, as I was writing the book, and we were talking through a lot of these things, and we were trying to say, like, how do we explain to somebody what Clubany is? Like somebody that finishes the quest. And we were struggling with this for a while. We're like, how do we get the origins, the ideas, the things that we're working on and we're thinking through to share with them and to give them that kind of a baseline to understand, like, what does this mean? And we thought, well, you can have some catchy slogans, you could have a website, you could have whatever, but the truth of the matter is there's so much more to this than just a website or whatever. And we originally, our original idea was to say, like, well, I guess anybody that joins Clubany goes through the quest, the core values quest right out the gate, give them my book when it's done. That'll be step one. Read my book and you'll be able to understand a lot of where all this came from. You'll understand about Amelia, some of the origins of Clubany and where a lot of the stuff came from and some of these initial concepts and how you came along. All that stuff is in that story, right? So in a way, you could kind of get it. But then we were both like, well, that doesn't really explain. I mean, it's an important part of the whole entire conversation, obviously, but it's not really Clubany, right? Like Clubany was a piece of that went into
right,
that.
because
so
the thing is, it's a different story. Because Clubany is a different story. Your book is your and Amelia's story. So in order I can understand you and Amelia's and Living for Two, because I can read the book and that tells a story. To me, this is the difference between a story and not a story, right? Anything that's not a story, regardless of if you give the right information, a story basically
context.
In a way, it's context, because a story allows the writer to take the reader into their world.
Right.
Okay.
On
So
a
you
journey.
basically
Yeah.
you walking along with the writer. That is what
Mhm.
a story does. That's why, and it's so powerful because we as human beings, we are really in a way attracted to stories. We love to hear stories.
That's how we think.
It's how we
Right.
remember
Yeah.
as well.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Stories how we remember. In the past, if you are going to, pass down any kind of, I guess, lessons, concepts, or whatever, you tell a story. You don't say, hey, the silver rule, the golden rule, or whatever. You
Right.
tell a story because
Right.
you tell me, hey, the golden rule or eat the frog, whatever. I don't remember. I have no idea what it means. But with
Right.
the context
Yeah.
is what a story
Right.
is. Because the story
Exactly.
is saying, you know, this guy does this, blah, blah, blah. You tell a story that illustrates the concept. You don't actually tell the concept. So before the advent of writing, how histories and how people say, well, you shouldn't be out at night or go alone in the safari African jungle with a lion eat
It's
you,
always
right?
just a spoken
You
word. It was just a story through a spoken word that was passed down from people to people. I mean, that's basically what the Bible is. That's basically
exactly.
what mythology is. I mean, like that's I
It's
mean,
always a concept,
right.
but it's illustrating the story because we, as human beings, only remember stories. So
Right.
story is essentially a memory storage, right? It's a memory palace.
Right.
It's and that's why I think anyone who doesn't have stories or story that doesn't change them, I think they don't understand what story is. Story is just memories, right? Because
Right.
I mean, you tell kids about the stranger danger, right? I mean, even if you say stranger danger or make any kind of alliterations or and buzzword or whatever, kids have no idea. But you tell a story and everybody knows a story about the boogeyman or whatever,
Mhm.
they understand and say, well, stay away the boogeyman. That's the moral of the story. I mean, every story has a moral. Every story has a lesson. That's why there is stories. And I think people are missing that point is, having a story is essentially our ingenious way to store the memory that we have to pass
Yeah.
on to ourselves, to our kids, and to other people.
Because we can't remember this shit. Like I can't remember everything about the things they carried and what Tim O'Brien went into and described in this book. I can't remember that. I don't have to. As a matter of fact, like writing for me is a way for me to purge and to keep focusing
Hmm.
on learning new stuff because I can't fucking remember all this stuff. If I had this still sitting in my head, I would be like, oh, the things they carried, what was that about? And like, what did he talk about? Oh, what was I write this stuff down so I can remember, the key learnings that I wanted to take out of this. And I have like my notes and stuff like that. Yeah, I can go back and look at my notes, but like that doesn't really give me a story. Those are just notes. You're just capturing like, a quick little like, one liner or something like that. There's no additional context behind
That's
that.
that's why I think that anyone who want to take notes need to write a story
Right, exactly.
about paint a
Exactly.
picture.
Yes.
Don't just write note. Hey, golden rule, the platinum rule, whatever.
Right.
What the hell does that mean?
This is
Without
this is what
context, it doesn't
this
mean
is
anything.
this is a note. Stories can save us. This is what I mean when I say stories can save us, and this is how this book made me think of that. And that is what this year of magical learning journey is, and that's what we, So going back to what I was talking about when we were talking about how do we describe. Felicia's on spring break, so she's out having lunch with a friend right now, and I had to go put him down, and I put him on camera because I thought I heard him squirm down there, and he is now. He's up and flipping around. Anyway, hopefully he falls back asleep.
This
So
is nap time.
it is nap time, yeah. But as going back to what I was talking about before, of like when we were trying to describe to people like what is clubbing, what was the story that we wanted to tell them, and we were like, well, maybe I Can't Imagine will tell that story, and then we were like, well, I mean, we got rightfully so, we got a little
It's
cold
part
feet.
of
It's
it, but it's
part of
not a
it,
story.
right? And as much as I want people to learn about Amelia, I don't want club Clubany has everything to do with Amelia and has nothing to do with Amelia. Like while she's maybe the why and the core behind a lot of this stuff, but she's not Clubany. Like we're so far removed from that moment of where we're at right now of what this idea is. This is a you and I idea at this point in time. This is our brainchild. This is our meaningful work project together. This has nothing to do with like I Can't Imagine was mine, right? Like and like this is ours, right? And we've been going through this journey together. So the moral of the story, what I was trying to get to is this kind of became our de facto solution as to how do we describe clubbing to somebody? Like we talked about, if we want them to go and instill reading and reflection stuff, we're like, why don't we just give them a Darren Daly to go reflect on, or give them some other thing? No, we'll give them this. The Alchemist, 365 of these down the road, and then you can go listen to what Drew and Chris had to say about this stuff and dive deeper as much as you want to dive deeper, reflect, write your own notes, tell your own story off of it. But at the same time, this is literally taking them step by step of 3 years of us developing this stuff, and we're not going to stop after this. I don't know where it goes after this, but like the point is we'll keep documenting and we'll keep sharing, we'll keep growing and learning and figuring out what we want to do going forward. And anybody else that wants to jump into it, they can at any point in time, and they can say, oh, okay, like I'll go follow my own evolution of this, and I'll catch up when I catch up, and I'll come and ask you guys questions when I get to a point in time where I'm like, I don't understand, like, what do you mean? Like, what do stories can save us mean? And we're like, oh, let's talk about it. This is because we won't remember. Like, there's no way if we were to go, somebody finishes their quest today, we have 10 new Clubany. Let's just fast forward in the future. We have 10 new Clubany scholarship recipients that are starting their core value quest today. We've already run 10 of these cycles now or whatever. There's 100 people in Clubany. We're like, how do we recreate this every single time where they can understand
and to keep it theme?
That's keep
also a challenge.
Right. Yeah. I think of all the stories that you and I tell every single night and be like, how does this story that we're talking about tonight, the stories can save us from Tim O'Brien's, the things they carried. Does this have any fundamental transformational properties? Yes, but no, not really. Like it's one tiny little piece of a bigger puzzle, that needs to be digested, learned, shared, and to be frank, like needs to be shared between the two of us, because I can't even remember this. You're going to be like, where did that piece of knowledge just come from? We haven't shared about it, talked about it, debated about it, come to an agreement about it, and then decided, okay, this is what this means, and now it's just another piece of the puzzle. Like, how the fuck do you share that with anybody else going forward unless you write it down, document it, talk about it, record it, something, right? Like, because otherwise you cannot recreate that to another group of people coming in. You're gonna not say the right things. You're gonna fast forward. You're gonna leap forward through the story. Like, and that's not what you should do. That's not the point.
And then you inadvertently change the core meaning of what and why Clubany started in the first place, right?
Yep.
Because this is part of the seventh generation AeroCore community. Because a lot of time, we stray away from the path or for the core value we should be embracing, and we say, well, for whatever reason, I get distracted. Now I'm on this tangent
right
elsewhere, and no one can
reel me
back to right. And this is important because a lot of times when we do certain things, and let's say we say, well, let's start doing something that is, hey, this idea is good or whatever, and then how do we pull ourselves back to the core fundamental of the reason why we started Clubany? So this is a lot for me. And for you to go back and say, okay, we talk about this, and what we do here in the far distant future, and let's say we fast forward far distant future, and we're doing something that is contradicting with what we do today.
Right.
And we go back to, well, what we do, I think we are veering off to a different path, to a wrong path.
Right.
And having this is what brings us back. And I think having the story kind of keep us to be consistent with the central idea and the central concept and core values of the why and the purpose of what we create Clubany for. And I think it's important. Otherwise, it could turn into something that we have no control over, because over time we get inch further and further, just like you and I on a boat, and we drift, right? We drift on in the ocean to who knows where, and we have no idea why we get there. So having the ability to say, hey, there is an anchor, there's a lighthouse somewhere that we can always reference to, and know exactly how we can drift from the one place to the next and go back to it.
What do you think the Bible is? I mean, like, legitimately, what do you think the Bible is? Like,
it's a collection of stories.
It's a collection of stories of how the church.
And each story is a lesson.
Each story is a lesson. And each story, when you could never have heard of Christianity or Judaism or anything, and then you could pick up this book and you could slowly but surely, on your own time and your own journey, you could learn what this is all about. You could learn what each story is and how it compounds on itself. And then you can engage with other people about it when you're ready or when you're not ready. But like, for in perpetuity going forward, like, everybody that ever has read the Bible knows, or that has studied it or has gone to school that's based off of it or learning lessons off of it, we all speak a similar language and we kind of understand sort of what's going on. People that get really into it, maybe they become priests or something like that or whatever, and they really want to dive deeper into this stuff.
Throughout the Christianity histories, there are many things that the Vatican did, right? They did, and they stray away from it, and then they went back to it, because the book's still there, it still exists. And so a lot of things they did in the past, like, whether we do it on a crusade or doing, or when we're on a mission, they tell certain people not to do this, not to do that, right? And they make rules to forbid or to allow certain things. But over time, they go back and say, well, we implement a new rules to forbid or to allow certain things. They actually took back some of those rules because they go back to the Bible and say, okay, this is what it say. Now
Right.
I think we have a new understanding of what it means. So whatever we understood before wasn't correct. Now we move back because if you didn't have the book, right, and you have created new rule based on some, you know, I guess on a surface understanding of what it is, and you build rules into it, you actually move yourself away from the core. And then without
Yep.
the book, you're going to continue to move away. It's
Drift.
going to
Like, I mean,
drift.
it's this is happening a little bit with my new Clubany light recruits that are coming in. Because like
Hmm.
I'm not making them go through this stuff. Because it's not Clubany, right? I mean, I can't force them to go, oh, go watch, True and I talk. The ones that really get it are the ones like that's fine. They do what they do read these things, and I don't
Hmm.
know if they watch any of these videos, but like, I actually I don't even know if they know that I'm making like podcast videos. But anyway, we'll be very transparent with anybody once it's full Clubany, right? It'll
Hmm.
probably be like, hey, you want to know where this has started, so you want to work on your core values quest while you're figuring out what to write about. Like, here's an idea. Go follow along with our process. Like, this is 365 days for you to learn about what it is, and there's a video if you want to watch it as well. If you want to go
365 hours.
exactly.
I heard something about that. If you spend 100 hours a year on any subject, right, you
Right.
are better than 95% of all the people in that subject.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean,
So
without a
imagine you
doubt.
do
Yeah.
365 hours on Clubberly. I mean, I think you're better than 95% of other people in terms of knowing your
Understanding
core
it.
value and living the life you're supposed to be living.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, but to your point earlier of the drift, like, because I'm not making somebody go through a documented process. When I
Hmm.
first had my first Clubany Light group, that when I took over this role, passionately told them the story of Clubany, basically, without saying Clubany, but I was like, this
Right,
is about Amelia. This is about how that shaped this, how this shaped this, how this did
right.
this, how that, and I told them all that stuff, right? And I spent a painstaking amount of time to describe that to them so that they understood what the origins of this were, even though they didn't know necessarily what it was, like what the origins of all this stuff was and why we were going to be doing what we were doing going forward. Now, with the new people that I inherited into this whole entire thing, it's now more of a this is just what we do and
Hmm.
follow along with the other people. And I'll slowly reveal stuff over time. But I know that I haven't done a good enough job of spending the time because it's exhausting. Like, it is exhausting trying to explain all of this to somebody. You know what I mean?
This is what we talked about yesterday about fractal, right? You should not
Right,
be explaining to every single recruit. You're supposed to only, your first layer, the first class, right?
right.
You explain to the first class. Then the class you explain to will have a class of their own.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the way it should be, because
Exactly.
otherwise, if you have hundreds and thousands, even millions of people, you can't explain to everybody, regardless if you make videos or
No,
whatnot.
no, not at all. That's the funny thing about Christianity or whatever. Like, you can't just walk in for somebody to understand the faith of Christianity at the level of a priest, or Catholicism at the level of a priest. It would take them a college education, years and years of practice, years and years. Like, it's like Buddhism, right? You can't just walk into a Buddhist temple and say like, "Oh, I'm a Buddhist." They're like, "No, no, no." Like, that's cute, but you got a long way to go. But for them to be able to describe that to anybody and to take you on that journey, that is an insane amount of time. I mean, think about the time that you and I are putting into us even figuring out what Clubany is and blazing the original trail for and leaving the crumbs going. We like you said, we put in, on a daily basis, reading,
We
writing,
doing
and
this for
this, like,
almost
it's
three
like 3-4
years,
hours a
right?
day,
I mean,
yeah.
and we meet every day for an hour. That's not including the activity we do on our own, which is reading, writing, exercise,
Right.
and all that. But that's the thing is we spend 3 years of at least an hour,
Oh, I
like
mean, it's 3 hours a day. I mean, at least. I
3 hours
mean,
a day, right?
yeah, like, it's like, at least for me. I mean, in between reading, writing, this, and all the other living for two, no, but just other living my values. I mean, like, I'm not even counting that stuff. I'm just talking about the basis of the ideas and fundamental principles of Clubany. It's at least an hour. It's at least 3 hours a day.
Right. I mean, so the bottom line is this tremendous amount of hours that we put into this thing, which to me it seems like a breeze.
Right.
I
It does.
don't know
It's
about
not
you, but it's
no,
part
yeah,
of
it's not
it's
hard.
part of
It's
who I
fun.
am. It's a part of
Right.
life. So it's part of the story already.
Right.
So it's not like, I'm saying to emphasize the amount of
We can't
hours
give
and
that time.
effort
Yeah, we can't give that
we
time to
we
anybody.
we, we
It can
can
never.
and it just
Right.
yank it. Hey, here you
Right.
are. You need to have this amount of hours to understand. So that's my point.
No, you're totally right. And not only that, like if we weren't doing this, like if we tried to go take thousands and thousands of hours in our collective being and understanding the language that we speak and tried to give it to somebody else just by spoken word, if we did accomplish that, like I think we could, but I think if we did accomplish that, it is going to be so incredibly involved, time consuming, and so unscalable. And not that scalability is the key, but like, I mean, it's just not possible to replicate it. There's probably only a few stories that people remember from ancient humanity, right? Like, because it was so hard to continue to learn it, pass it down, store it. So the stories just don't survive, right? But like now we have that's why writing is so powerful. Like you can share that story and document it. Like now we even have new things of like video and YouTube and the internet and whatever else we want to document and store the stuff on. But we can help other people at scale now. And so we just continue to do what we do best. We beaver and
We document. That's all we do. I don't mind if people watches it, and I don't.
Mhm.
But
This
that's the
is for
thing is
us. Yeah.
I'm doing this for myself, right?
Right.
And I'm just documenting the easy way. Just press the record button. You just document it, and then
Right.
that takes no effort at all. And so I'm not veering away from the things that I like to do, just to document and put on a podcast or something like that. So,
Right.
like I said, before when we were doing something that is kind of out of the way, I said, well, that's not aligning with what we do, with what we want to do. So
Right.
we gotta X that. And so having the ability to document, it's more for ourselves than
Mhm.
for other people, but it's also a benefit to other people if anything else.
It's a trail. It's like if you climbed Mount Everest and then you just never documented what you did, how could anybody ever repeat that? They would maybe try, but they would go up a different path and maybe they
Yep.
die, maybe they don't, but there's no way they will ever take the same path. And I'm not saying you have to take the same path as us, but we can certainly do our part to illuminate a path forward if you want to take that path forward. But
I
we're
mean,
not.
there's multitude ways you can take the path, right? You can, just like take like all the other paths you take on the mountain, right? You go so well, one, your to the left is going to this route, go to the right, go to that. You can take some of the same route and then veer up to a different route, along the way. And so you can pick and choose the path, the collective path that you have. But
Right.
some of the paths has already been labeled for you. Hey, go to the left is, off the cliff, go to the right. So,
Yeah.
whatever. So having
Why
the
not learn
ability
from
to
others,
take segments and sections of each of these paths and make your own.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm glad the more and more that we do this, the more and more I, I'm almost getting more sad because I'm like, shit, we're already at 224. I can't even honestly, I can't believe that we're at 224 of these, and I don't mean that in like like I didn't think we could do it. I'm just like, I didn't even realize we were at 224. And I'm like, holy shit, we're already at 224. There's only 140 left. And I'm like, what are we going to do then? Because it's fun and we enjoy it and we're learning together and we're growing and all this other stuff. And I'm at 353 with my journey. And I know I'm not going to ever stop doing this. I'll probably pull back a little bit on it of like only when I really have a profound thought that I want to document and share versus like, did I really need to write the stories can save us from the things they carried? Probably not. I liked this book and I probably would have wanted to write this reflection. But from the one we did last night with the brief history of time, I wouldn't have written a reflection off that. My notes are fine with that one. I didn't understand it anyway. I was making something up just for a creative writing exercise. If I'm going to use my creative writing exercise, I'm going to go do something completely different creative writing wise. But this stuff, as it pertains to Clubney, I'll pick and choose, when I continue to do this, and I'll continue to bring it to you, and we can continue to talk about these things. But it won't be able to be like every single day, like forever and ever and ever. Like it'll have to morph into something different.
Yeah, it's gonna have to. I mean, the pace is gonna have to slow down a little
Right.
bit, just because we don't have enough books in the pipelines or reflections in the pipeline to kind of get on do a podcast about.
Exactly.
And I think that's the sad part. But even the Bible is has a beginning, has an end. It doesn't goes
Right.
on forever because if we talk about all of the things that is related to company, we understand what company is about. I think that is what the mission of documentation is about.
Yeah.
So how do we know, what is the core? How do we balance everything out in the grand scheme of things? So eventually some of these things going to have to stop, because eventually you get to a certain books, it's a repeat of another book that we've done before. The only thing we can do is, maybe enhance the
It's a
the
tiny
lesson we
tweak.
learn and tweak it to this
It's
and there.
an add-on to something we already have,
But
or
eventually the
you know,
tweak is not gonna be impactful, just because it's the
right.
same thing we talk about 10 times already.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we said a beaver must stand? But no, so I did Talking to Strangers and Blink, two Malcolm Gladwell books in the past 2 days.
Mm.
Like, this was about your, slow down time for your elephant's greatest tricks, right? You know what that means, but we already know what that means. Like, and like I already read, like the fact that I read Blink and Talking to Strangers, I've read Blink and Talking to Strangers now 10 different times. This is not a new concept to me at all. I learned some fun, interesting enhancements onto it. The concept of Blink, is not new to me. The concept of talking to strangers and implicit bias, and we've talked about this shit already a million different times. We've talked about the power of our elephants, thinking fast and slow, nudge, all these things, right? It's like we can't go any further on that neural path, very
Right.
much for
Once the elephant has mastered the concept, they don't want to. There's nothing for us to add to that more masterful.
Right. We want novelty. We want new things that'll completely shake, a whole new paradigm out of us. And we're like, oh shit, I didn't see that, like for me, like we've already seen a lot of the stuff that I'm writing about, and I still love writing about this stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
But like I said, I will be very much more selective in the future as to what I write about. It won't just be every book that I read. I mean, like I'll take notes on them. Don't get me wrong. Like I'll still take notes, and I'll still refer back to if I want to remember, oh, what was that cool psychology study from Blink, about Dr. John Gottman and how he can predict divorces within like 10 minutes of observing somebody. Like I might refer back to that, but I don't need to that doesn't enhance any club stuff.
Right.
And a note is fine for that. It does not need to be this story that we tell, and we're continuing to shape the narrative around clubbing. I agree with you. I think we'll slow down.
We'll find something else. As long as you have the clubbing activity, the core values, and I guess the beavering on purpose will always happen.
Yep, exactly. I have to ask respectfully to go. Luca is still dancing in his crib right now, and I need to go put him back down to sleep before my wife gets home. And it's like, what the fuck? I can't even leave here for 5 minutes to go hang out with my friend for a lunch while I'm on spring break. And you're gonna be like, no, I was talking.
Yeah, you should not leave me again.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, that was fun. Thanks for the midday fun. That was a good discussion. Any final thoughts before we jump?
Yes, I think the stories. Everybody has a story, and stories are not just for fantasies anymore, because in real life, story does affect who you are and does influence who you become.
They transform your life. I mean, in a lot of ways, if you leverage them the right way. So the question we can leave for everybody else is, what stories have transformed your life? Thanks for joining, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Sounds good.